All right, welcome back to another episode of Author Spotlight here at Self Publish in 30 Days. I'm Leah Swander, the engagement coordinator here, and I'm so excited to have with us Douglas S. Pierce. He is a epic and urban fantasy author. You have a lot of books out, from what I know. One that I really want to talk about today is Haunted Maiden, and also just all of your other stories because it just seems so cool and unique. And you actually say that you say you have unconventional heroes, unforgettable stories, and unique worlds, which is so fascinating. So I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about you and how you got involved in writing and creating.
All right. Thank you very much, Leah. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here today, talk to you and talk about my books. I mean, one of my great loves is the writing and stories and stuff that we get to do. Um, so I've always been into writing. My mother, at a very young age, I made a habit of taking my brother and I to libraries every week and to bookstores when we could afford it. But it was, she always wanted us, she didn't care what we read, she just wanted us to see us reading. And so from very early on, I was interested in the stories of Native Americans and of European history, ancient history, and then of course that kind of gravitated into fantasy and Tolkien and so many, Andre Norton, so many great authors of a while back. Tell how old I am here, but so just it's always been something that I've wanted to do, and that I always, I grew up on epic fantasy stories of, brave heroes fighting against impossible odds and going on great big long quests and such. And so, um, for the longest time, I never thought I would actually sit down and write a book. I wanted to, but never thought I had the time raising a family. Um, but when my daughter got old enough and the to handle herself for the most part, and my wife was doing her thing, I was able to sit down and start writing. And my writing started, my professional writing career started more with the urban fantasy, the Rusty Bones story. Um, I did a blog called Undead Man Blogging, and I kind of blogged from a perspective of a guy who became a special agent in Zombie, and about his being kind of disgruntled with the experience. And then so that blog, I got involved friends, I involved all sorts of other folks, and it just kind of evolved into, well, I've got enough here for a book, and so I put it into a book, Omega Fall or Omega Rising, which is out and on Amazon as well. But that urban fantasy was never my true first love. My first love was always epic fantasy, and so I wrote. Several years ago, a friend of mine online, we got involved in online discussions, and we kind of plotted out the ideas for a book, and we started kind of doing things together. She ended up getting pregnant and wanted to focus on her baby, and so she said, "Here, you take the story and run with it." And um, that story eventually evolved into the Maiden Song, which is this big book here, huge. And
Wow.
when I'm thinking epic fantasy, I'm thinking really big books, and so I wrote this book over the course of 6 years, perhaps. I took a couple of rewrites and some figuring things out, um, and then I published it as self-published it as the Maiden Song. I got some comments, some really good readers and some people who said, you know what, it's a great story. It's really good, but it really kind of you need to break it up into two books. And so that's what I did. Is I broke it up into the Hunted Maiden and then the Seedling Song. So slightly smaller, more digestible bits. The
They're
stories
still like pretty thick books though.
they,
Like there's a lot of story in there.
they are still very large books and great story. And I'm working on book 3. So it's like, and also I have a coloring book based on the the female lead characters. She grew up in a circus, and so I have this really great artist I'm working with who is doing coloring book images, and we're in the process of getting that uploaded this month, and it should be available in September. It's called Seldy's Circus Adventures, and it's
Wow.
basically her life growing up in the circus, before the story of the Hunted Maiden. So
That is so cool, and I love how it kind of started as blog, right? And then you already had that content, you just made it into a book, and then with the book you're creating other content with like a coloring book about the main character, which is so cool. And it kind of brings the characters to life, right? Like we can all imagine what they look like in our head, but kind of giving a visual makes the book so much more interesting and like,
yeah,
one like, oh my gosh, I'm picturing this person in my head now. And
right.
so that's really cool. Congratulations with the coloring book. That's amazing.
Thank you, thank you. I think at the events where I go to for signing events, having the coloring book is going to greatly enhance my sales. I think because there'll be the kids who will be attracted to the coloring books, plus those adults who like to color anyway, and there's quite a few of those.
Totally.
And it's a way to kind of tangibly experience the character in a way that.
Totally.
And circus animals. Who doesn't like circus animals and circus stuff?
Right. And making it any color you want. That's really fun.
Absolutely.
So you said that you had self-published that first book and then got some reviews and then made it into two.
Yes.
So what made you do kind of the self-publishing route?
So the thing I didn't mention is I kind of got into the literary world in a sense because my wife is a writer as well, and she was looking to publish her books that she was writing, and she couldn't get an agent. And so I kind of looked at, given the work that I do has a legal kind of background, the day job sort of thing. I said, well, it can't be that difficult to be a literary agent. So I kind of looked and studied and figured out how to try and represent her books to publish. And I ended up representing a few other folks as well, but not having any real connections to the literary world, not having the knowing contacts that I could reach out to publishers and say, hey, I got this book that you'll really love. That kind of cut me short as a literary agent, but I learned the book industry a bit. I learned how books get made and the process they go through in a traditional publisher. And so when it came time to start writing my own books, I said, you know what? I know the process enough, and Amazon and other other entities make it so easy to do so that I really said, well, all right, I want to get an editor and I'll get cover artists and formatters, those people, professionals who do the stuff that I don't know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And but then I can control what goes into the book. I don't have to go by any editors. Hey, we don't really want to, you're going on touchy ground here, or no, I was able to say, you know what? I'm going to go by my own moral compass. I'm going to go by how the story feels authentic and real to me, and tell it the way I feel it needs to be told.
Yeah. And now you can, create things like a coloring book without having to get permission or.
No one owns these characters or this world but me. And so that sense of control is one of the key things that brought me to self-publishing, because I wanted to experiment with how I wrote some of my prose as well. I use something that I call sonic markers. Music is a huge part of the Hunted Maiden and the Seedling Song. It underlies the magic and all that sort of stuff. And so I use these sonic markers, or sort of like sounds like kerplunk or thrum, as standalone lines that kind of indicate that when a scene is becoming super important, like the character hears these sounds going on. It's part of the music of the world that's going on around them. And the reader gets this sense of, I think they get a sense of rhythm and up to the story as well. And also, once you start seeing those sonic markers hit, something super important is happening. And because it all ties into the magic of the world.
Yeah, that's really cool. And with that, the thought of it maybe being turned into a movie one day.
Exactly.
You already have auditory, markers, like you were saying. So that's really awesome. So you said that you had a blog, and that's kind of how it turned into writing a book. And that was kind of your more the urban tale, and so then you wanted to kind of go into epic fantasy. So what gave you the most productivity when going from those two different kind of genres? and maybe what would be your advice to authors who are, interested in the same kind of stories, but how do you sit down and write thick books that eventually get turned into two? How do you stay productive in creating that content?
Right. Well, so it's a really important thing to immerse yourself in the characters that you're writing about. For my urban fantasy, I wrote it as a blog, and so I figured the easiest way to turn it into a book was to go in the first person perspective. And who else to hear from Rusty's story than himself? He's a dead guy telling his own story. That just seemed too ironic to resist. But so part of it is understanding the genre in which you're writing, and part of it is understanding the voice that you want to come through in that. And so with Rusty's story, it was easy to sit down and I didn't try to start out writing a book. I just did a blog, and it was relatively easy every couple of days sit down and write a blog entry of something that amused me or some thought or whatever. With the Maiden Song, which became the Hunted Maiden and the Seedling Song, I had to be a lot more intentional in the writing process. And so I had to create time to do it and a routine that worked for me. And I'm still in many ways trying to get back into a real routine for writing. The pandemic hasn't helped
Right.
much. If somebody had said a couple of years ago, you're going to have about 18 months of where you're going to be working from home and you're not having to go into the office and not going to be able to do much or go out, I figured I'd be writing all sorts of books in that time.
Right. Didn't pan out that way.
Did not turn out that way. No, not at all. But so what I found that I needed to create a routine to where I would go to like our local library or a coffee shop, and I would write out a scene, and then I would basically when I hit the end of the scene, I would stop writing and I'd go back and do some review and edit and kind of get myself into a different headspace. Because usually when I switch scenes, I'm switching character perspectives. And so I kind of need to get back into the head of a different character at that point. So it's really important it was important for me then to create a routine, and then it's been really difficult since I finished that book and have gotten into the publishing, the marketing and the social media aspects of things. All that distracts from the actual pure writing of things. And so I'm still in ways trying to find that.
Yeah. I like what you said though of really embracing the characters that you're writing about and kind of vicariously live through them.
Mhm.
That's really embracing the story, and it kind of brings more of probably a personality to those characters, because you have to be invested in them. And it's always cool to, write fantasy and not about your real world. I think that's why I was so drawn to books as a kid, because I just wanted to escape the world and live in some other epic world or with other creatures. And so it's cool that you get to create those kind of things for kids now, or for anybody now.
Right.
So you're a multi author. You have I think I counted 5 books. It might be.
It's 4 books, but really when it comes down to it, it's technically 3 because it's the Hunted Maiden, the Seedling Song are books 1 and 2 of a series, and Omega Rising is book 1 of another series, and I've got second book of that in process, and the third book of. So yeah, it looks more impressive than it really is.
No, it's still impressive. Hey, just 1 book is amazing.
Yes.
But how has publishing your books improved your life? How has it changed your life?
It's I can't say financial success yet because probably when you look at it, I'm probably still in the negative in total costs versus earnings or whatever. But for me, it's an expression of who I am. It's a way of living out a fantasy in a sense. Yes, I can't be in this fantasy world of the Hunted Maiden, but I can experience it by writing in it and editing in it, but also going out to events and telling people about the story and sharing images and such on my website or on Instagram. Kind of getting back into that world whenever I can. So it's a way of living vicariously through the stories you've written, but also of just seeing the excitement when you start telling somebody about your book and they're like, "Oh, that sounds so cool," and you're like, "Yeah, and you can buy it, and I'll sign it." And
Right.
yeah, I was at a Harry Potter event in a nearby town in Jackson, Michigan, and just so those were already people that were excited about fantasy stuff. And then when I tell them about the magic in my world, they're like, "Oh yeah, I gotta have some of this." And so just to see the excitement that people want to pick up your book and read it, and they're willing to pay you money for it, and
Right.
that's just
Totally.
amazing.
It seems empowering. I am not a published author yet. I have one in the works, but it just seems right, like so empowering of going out and being like, I'm an author and I just created this whole world, like you were saying, like magic. And so yeah, I like what you said though, like living out who you truly are. And I think it's hard, or it's harder maybe when you're writing like an autobiography and you gotta go
Yeah,
live and like really live in your truth and like
yeah,
it's really out there in the open, but the non or the fiction side of things is really interesting to me, because I have loved, like I remember reading Seven Thumps. Seven Thumps. Do you know that series?
not offhand.
It was not a fan.
I don't know.
Oh.
I've
Oh.
heard of it before.
Yeah, it's kind of like Harry Potter world, but I
Okay.
just remember like being so immersed in those fantasy worlds. And then, when I was 12, thinking I was living in it, running around the street.
Oh
So
yeah.
there's something just so empowering about fiction and like these epic fantasies that you're creating. So more power to you to just live in your truth that way.
Absolutely.
Um,
Thank you.
so you have a website. It's just douglaspiercebooks.com. That's where you can find out more about you and your creations. But where else can the audience find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. On Instagram it's Douglas S. Pierce Books. At Douglas S. Pierce Books. And Twitter it's at Douglas S. Pierce 3. You can't. I tried the books thing; it didn't work. But and then also, if you do a search for Douglas S. Pierce Books on Facebook, you can find me there. Agent Rusty Bones has his own Facebook page that I need to update every once in a while, where he kind of talks. He calls me his little author buddy. So yeah, it's fun because I've got some dolls of the characters as well that I had made by the same gal who did the artwork for things. And I wish I didn't grab them before the interview because they're out in the car right now for my last event. But yeah, on my Instagram though, you can see those dolls, and on my website, I think I've got some of them posted there as well. So, but yeah,
Well,
so
yeah, definitely find him on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the things. And to just kind of wrap up this interview, what is your parting piece of advice to the person who wants to create these epic fantasy worlds and wants to publish their book, but just are stuck and don't know what to do? What's your parting piece of advice?
right. Well, one of the things I try to do as an author is I try to help other authors a lot. I have this thing on my Instagram where I post real or self-publishing real talk, and I talk about the business aspects of self-publishing, how to set a budget, kinds of things you can do to increase your your exposure, and also just kind of the professional services you want to engage. So my main advice to an aspiring author who wants to get their book published is believe in yourself, believe in your world and your magic, and then find the people that will help you to bring it into the world. That might be a professional editor who can help polish your prose because we all have blind spots in our writing. Doesn't matter how good a writer you are, we all have typos, we all have grammar mistakes that are ingrained and that you try, no matter how many times you reread your own stuff, you're going to miss something.
Totally.
And so believe in yourself, believe in your magic, and then bring those who believe in you to help bring your creation into existence. Professional editors, book cover artists, formatters, those things that you don't know how to do. There are those out there who know how to do it, and will do it for a reasonable price if you know what you're looking for and you find the right people. So.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. So not only should they follow you to go find more about your books, but to also just get advice about self-publishing and the world that this business is turning into. We kind of say here at Self-Publish in 30 Days, the authorship world is kind of like the music world, right? Like SoundCloud happened, so all these labels kind of didn't matter necessarily because anybody can be an artist, and that's kind of how it is with authorship. Anybody can be an author, and you can share your story. So that's super empowering. Do you have any last closing words before we wrap it up?
There are millions of books being published every year. Yours could be one of them if you know how to follow it. And now making that a success, and what does successful publishing mean to you? Well, it might just mean that somebody else reads your story and loves it. It might mean that you make an income out of it, but you've got to define success for yourself, and then take those proactive steps to create that success for yourself.
Totally. I love it. That's making me like energized to go like write more in my book.
Yeah, good.
But thank you so much for being on Author Spotlight. I'm so excited to learn more about their books. I'm excited to order them and read them because I love fiction, and I love escaping into these like fantasy worlds. So be sure to follow Douglas on all social media platforms. You can check out his books on douglaspiercebooks.com. And I think they're also on Amazon, yeah?
They are on Amazon. I publish them on Amazon, so they're all on Amazon as well. So.
There we go. Well, thank you so much, Douglas. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Leah. Appreciate it.